Beach. My name is Stephen Marici, and if you're visiting with us this morning, we want to thank you for skipping the season highlights to be here. You know, competition is in the air today, as this is an exciting time for football fans all across America. You know, for most of us, the exciting part of any game can be the last couple of minutes. Some of the greatest comebacks ever recorded are when the stakes are high, the score is close, and the game is almost over. This is when we can have some of the greatest upsets or miraculous victories in American football. You know, with that same spirit of excitement, I've titled my lesson, 2-Minute Warning. In football, the 2-minute warning is used to notify the players and the coach that there is only 2 minutes left in the game. Now, this is a free timeout for both teams, and during this time, teams have a few choices. They can accept defeat, try to maintain their lead, or change up their strategy and make a last-ditch effort to win the game. You know, when we see these incredible turnarounds, this total change in direction of the game, we get excited. And we get excited because despite all odds stacked against them, the underdog wins the game. You know, I believe our God gets excited when he sees an incredible turnaround, a total change in our lives. You know, when we think of choices, we all are faced with different choices in our lives. And I'm reminded of a story when my grandfather was given his 2-minute warning. And I want to give you guys a little bit of a background about him. He was born in 1909. This is my great-grandfather. And he came down from Italy when he was about 8 years old. He worked as a mechanic for several years. He was a very healthy guy, owned his own home, grew all his vegetables and fruits in the backyard. And he was a very funny guy, too. Every Christmas, I got the same gift from him, and it was a bag of marbles. I still, to this day, don't know what he was trying to tell me. But there was one time in his 90s, and he was driving, and he was speeding. And he got pulled over by the police. And the officer walks up to his window and says, "Sir, do you know how fast you're going?" And he says to him, "Son, when you get to be about my age, you got to go everywhere fast." You know, this is who he was. He was a great guy, a fun guy. And I remember in the last year of his life, my dad asked him if he wanted to study the Bible. And so they started studying, and he started developing a relationship with God. And as they were studying, he was being very open and vulnerable with where he was at in his life. But there were two things that held him back from making the decision to become a Christian. One was that his son owed him $4,000 and never paid it back, and he just couldn't forgive him. And the other was that he didn't believe that God would forgive him in the last year of his life. You know, if you were given that choice, how would you respond? In football, when that warning is heard throughout the stadium, those players have a choice. And we also have a choice that can change the outcome of our lives. You know, I'm not sure where you're at this morning, but my prayer is that we would leave here today understanding God is giving us a chance to make a choice. And that 2-minute warning might just be the thing that helps us win the game. Today we're going to spend the bulk of our time in Luke chapter 23. And here we're going to take a look at 3 different people that had a choice to either listen to Jesus and believe in him, or do nothing and go with the crowd. But first I want to give you a little bit of a background as to what's going on. You know, the Jews, they were fed up with Jesus. They were tired of this guy who said he was the king. They were tired of him and what he said about being the Messiah, the chosen one, God's son. And to them, he was a heretic. He was a blasphemer. Because of this, they wanted him dead. And during this time, the Jews just couldn't kill him because they were under the rule of the Roman Empire. They had to find a way to convince the Romans that he was a threat to their society. And in the past, the Jews have revolted so many times against the Romans, so for them to make Jesus look like someone who's leading a rebellion would have been very easy for him to do, or for them to do. And so when the Jews brought Jesus to Pilate and questioned him, Pilate found no basis for charging him with a crime. But the Jews insisted that he was stirring up people all over Judea. Pilate, a Roman governor, overseeing this case, wants no part of this decision. So he sends Jesus to stand trial under Herod because Jesus was under his jurisdiction. So Herod and the people came against Jesus with many questions, and Jesus gave no answer. He said nothing. You know, I believe some of us can be like Herod. When faced with Jesus, we want nothing to do with him. Or we can just pass him off to somebody else. So they sent him back to Pilate, and this is where we pick up in Luke chapter 23, verse 13. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers of the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for the charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us, as you can see. He has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man." You know, Pilate is at a crossroads here. He sees Jesus, a man who is innocent, and he tries to appeal to the people. And when he sees he's getting nowhere, he tries to bargain with them. Let me just punish him. And he tries to find a way of getting out of this decision making. He tries to find a way to defer it. You know, he desired to be liked by people, to fit in, more than to do the right thing. He also wanted to release Jesus, but being in good with the people was more important to him than making the right choice. You know, these were the things that held him back. What are the things that can hold you back from making the choice to follow Jesus? Some of you are so close to following him, but there's one thing that you're not willing to let go of. And some of you need to start truly following him again. You know, we can all have different things that lead us away from making the right decision. Pilate knew that releasing Jesus was the right thing to do. He had been given the authority and the power to make that decision. But he tries to pass him off to Herod. And then Herod sent him back to Pilate. So now Pilate has to make the choice. But before he makes that choice, he receives a warning from someone close to him. Let's go to Matthew chapter 27, verse 15. It says, "Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, 'Which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?' For he knew it was out of self-interest that they handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: 'Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him.'" You know, Pilate received his 2-minute warning, and it was from his wife. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, and his wife knew Jesus was innocent. So what's the problem here? What's the dilemma? You know, how many of you men in here have got good advice from your wife and you just didn't take it? I want to let you know that it's okay, because there's been many times that I have not taken advice from my wife and suffered the consequence. And most of those times, my wife was right. Most of the time. No. You know, but we can see that God was trying to get his attention through his wife. God will use people, billboards, commercials, near-death experiences, all sorts of things to get us to wake up and pay attention or evaluate where we're at. Maybe God has been using these things to get your attention. And he's trying to let you know that if you don't change your game strategy, if you don't evaluate where you're at and try to make those changes, you're going to lose the game. But God doesn't want us to lose the game. God wants everyone to make it. He wants everyone to win. So much so that he uses these things to get our attention. In Acts chapter 17, verse 26, it says, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he is not far from each of us. You know, the evidence of God is all around us. God created us so that we might reach out to him and follow him. And he set the time in which we live, hoping that the different things that are in our life might motivate us to go after him. You know, but some of us, we do nothing. You know, I want you to imagine for a second that it's the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, and your favorite team is playing. Your favorite team. I'm not talking about the Patriots or the Ravens, but your favorite team is playing. And the 2-minute warning goes off, and the game is tied. Both teams come back onto the field, and you're cheering for your favorite team, and your favorite team does nothing to stop the other team from winning. How would you feel? I'd be mad. I'd be angry. You know, I might throw my Doritos at somebody. Might throw them at Reuben. You know, but what are we doing to win the game? To win the race, to get the prize? You know, we all want a relationship with God. We all want to end up in heaven. But what are you doing to get there? God gives us clear direction here in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets a prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified from the prize." You know, Paul compares life to a race. We're all in this race together. And he tells us to run in such a way so that we will win the prize, so we will cross the finish line. You know, I want us to think about that for a second. He says that we have to be intentional about how we live. And you know, if you're training to run a race, there's a lot of different things that go into that. You've got to have the right diet. You're out there training daily. You've got to be focused. You've got to be disciplined. There's a purpose for how you live and the choices you make. Are you even running as if you're in a race? Do people around you know that you're even competing? And so we're going to look at the ending here with Pilate in Luke 23, verse 18. It says, "But the whole crowd shouted, 'Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us.' And Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. And wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again. But they kept shouting, 'Crucify him! Crucify him!' And for the third time he spoke to them, 'Why? What crime has he committed? I have found no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore I will have him punished and release him.' But with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be crucified. And their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant them their demand." What do you think about Pilate's decision here? He had the authority to do whatever he wanted. He had the authority to save Jesus, to release this innocent man. But he deferred the decision to somebody else. Maybe Pilate felt bad. Maybe he felt like Jesus was innocent. But he cared more about pleasing the people than making the right choice. He tells them that the blood will be on their hands. And he shifts the blame onto them and ultimately makes no decision. I've heard a saying, my dad has said this to me before. He says, indecision is a decision. When we make no decision, we make a decision. This can be us. We want to do the right thing, but something else comes in and it knocks us out of bounds. We get distracted by our jobs, our family, or our selfish ambition. We have a desire to do what is right, but we allow these things to keep us from giving God our full attention. Pilate was a fan of Jesus. He wanted him to live. He was rooting for him. But he allowed the people to sway him. Are you like Pilate, cheering from the sidelines? Or are you in the game? So Pilate gives Jesus to the people to be crucified. And we return to the story after Jesus has been beaten, spat on, had the crown of thorns put on his head. Everyone has abandoned him. He's now by himself. And so we continue reading in Luke chapter 23, verse 32. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one." And the soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was written a notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God?" he said. "Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." This was probably the last 2 minutes of Jesus' life. And the only thing he was concerned with was pleasing God and getting to heaven. What does God want for you? God wants everyone to be saved. But we have decisions that we need to make. We can be like Pilate, who had the ability to make the right decision, to change some things, but just sat on the sidelines and watched. Or we can be like that thief on the cross, who is willing to pay the penalty for his sins, but in humility asked Jesus to remember him. I don't know where you're at today, but we all have a decision to make. If you're a Christian, continue to live your life for Jesus and he will remember you. If you're not a Christian and you're not sure what the right decision is, sit down with the person that brought you and ask them how you can get off the sidelines and get back onto the field. And I want you guys to remember today, this is your 2-minute warning. Amen.